Hi, everyone. We've hit the 5:30 time frame. I'm going to give folks just another minute or two to hop on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for your patience. All right. So in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Knox, and I am a senior planner here with the City of Reno in the Development Services Department. And today we are going to talk about the sign text amendment. So just kind of some brief pieces here. I'm going to run through a presentation. It'll be relatively quick, about 25 slides or so, and then I will open it up for any feedback, questions, concerns, comments, all of that good stuff at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the presentation. You should all be seeing it now. If for some reason you can't, please someone raise their hands to let me know or send something in the chat box so I can fix it. All righty. Having some slide advancing issues. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right, so first, I really want to take us through the process of how we got to where we are today. So some of you may have been involved with this in the very start. Some of you may be just now jumping in. So I want to make sure we have all the same information here. So this has really been an iterative process through the development of the red lines, bringing those red lines forward for review, and then going back to the drawing board based on that review quite a few times. So really, I'll be coming back to this slide, but generally there's been quite a process so far that started back in June of 2022. So again, the beginning stages of this was initiated through a council text amendment in June of 2022. That's when we began working on the red line staff amendment changes here. So we engaged with a consultant in the fall of 2022. And then in the spring, we held some initial stakeholder meetings to really discuss the current sign code regulations that we have. We wanted to talk about what different interest groups were interested in, what changes folks wanted to see. This really helped us to develop a first round of proposed amendments. All right, so what we heard in that initial 2023 stakeholder feedback was that our sign table really was the issue. It's a very large table of regulations and that it needed to be simplified. We also heard there were some inconsistency in formatting issues, some unclear language. Staff also had numerous implementation issues with the current standards and the language not being clear. We wanted to try and create some more consistency in there. And we also noticed that we needed to add some language to address content neutrality. So that is to ensure that when we're looking at signs, we're looking at the sign size, we're looking at the height, those types of factors, and not at the actual content of a sign itself. So to get a little bit more specific there and some of the changes we made, I'm going to walk us through some of the items that were in the first draft. We had some definition clarifications that we needed or some inclusions that we needed. So we did not have a definition for a monument sign. We went ahead and included that. A monument sign is pretty similar to what you see here, this McDonald's sign. We also wanted to be clear about the definition for a freestanding sign and what type of signs are included with a freestanding sign. So those are generally what we refer to as our pole signs and our monument signs. Both of those are different types of freestanding signs as opposed to, say, a wall sign. Again, I touched on this already, but we wanted to ensure we had a statement about content neutrality. And again, I kind of touched on this table of sign regulations. you can see the table, pieces of the table here. This is not anything you need to dig into necessarily. I just wanted to show that it's basically a table that has all of our zoning districts and all of the sign related regulations with those districts. So this is things like the height of a freestanding sign, the area of that freestanding sign or a wall sign. Are they allowed? Is illumination allowed? Those types of pieces. So really, this is the section of code that we heard the most issue with. So we tried to make some overall changes to be more consistent with the standards of measurement. For example, sometimes we utilized gross floor area to develop an area size for your wall sign. Other times we talked about business frontage. So we tried to really just be more consistent, not only for staff, but also for our code users and for the public to be able to look at the table and see, okay, what is it that I'm allowed to do? We also proposed to modify the table so that all businesses get a minimum square footage of signage. We were running into an issue where we'd have, say, a shopping center and you're allowed to have, 400 square feet total in that area. But you might have an anchor tenant comes in, takes all the signage, and then smaller businesses are left without any signage, or it could be already developed and then a new business comes in. So we needed to add something to ensure that everyone got at least a little bit of signage. That same table, it had 13 footnotes. We reduced that down to 4. So basically we tried to work in the footnotes into the actual table where it made sense. Some footnotes were also just footnotes that were not clear, that we don't need to utilize anymore. So we tried to simplify it in that manner as well. There are also some changes to the public facility allowance. We capped the freestanding signs in that zoning district to 6 feet and required a conditional use permit always. And that's not very similar to any of the other zoning districts. So we allowed for a little bit more height, so up to 8 feet, and not having to go through that conditional permit process for a freestanding monument sign. Our table was also missing some zoning districts, so there were no regulations associated for certain districts. For example, our parks, greenways, and open space, or our unincorporated transitions. That's really a residential type district, but they were just missing from the table here. We also tried to introduce some consistency in our entitlement review. So a larger part of the proposed amendments regarding the signage is in this downtown entertainment district, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But basically, we had a number of triggers that had an entitlement process for signs. So these are signs within 150 feet of the Truckee River or within a certain distance of residential zoning. And they had different entitlement reviews. And we said, let's just make everything related to a sign have to go through what's called a major site plan review. So again, not a ton of items in the sign code are going to trigger this, but when they do, it's at least clear and consistent that this is the type of review we're going to have. It goes through a public hearing. It'll also go before our planning commission. So again, this is just really a general understanding of what was included in the first draft of amendments, which has remained in the second draft, which is what we are really here to talk about tonight. So again, back to that process point. Again, I said it's going to be iterative, and I was going to come back here. So here we are again. The changes I just described were really part of the first round of the proposed amendments, which really helped us to draft the next round of amendments. So we then used that information, drafted that first round, and then we took this out to a series of stakeholder meetings. So this was in September. We held some stakeholder meetings, general public meetings. In October, we brought that same draft back to the Planning Commission along with the stakeholder input that we received. Our Planning Commission recommended that we discuss this with some downtown businesses, which we did. And then we took all of that information to the City Council to receive some more feedback. All of that feedback was then used to draft the newest version, which we're talking about here tonight. So generally, from our stakeholders, we heard an overwhelming response to remove an allowance, which basically allowed for virtually unlimited signage within our downtown entertainment district area. We also heard that we needed to make a few modifications to changes in our sign regulation table. We heard from some of our partner agencies, so that's like the Regional Transportation Commission or the Washoe County School District, regarding some proposed changes that they would have liked to see to better accommodate some of the work that they're doing. And just some general additional clarity was needed there. The Planning Commission also provided us with some feedback regarding the downtown sign allowance concerns and requested that we engaged directly with our downtown business owners regarding the signage to try and figure out, okay, what's a good path forward? How can we work this out here? So for our downtown business engagement, aside from our casino users, there really wasn't a strong expression of need to keep that unlimited signage. We also reviewed some of the existing signage, which indicated that even though this allowance was really in place since 2001, it really wasn't being used frequently, so it didn't seem like it needed to remain in the code. We took this information to City Council, and they also provided feedback to go ahead and move forward with removing that allowance for the unlimited downtown entertainment area signage, but make sure that that allowance still remains for our casino users as it does in code today. So again, the biggest change from draft 1 of the proposed amendments to the one we're talking about today does just that. So just for some background, code previously allowed for unlimited signage in the entire gaming overlay district. So this is an area over 2,000 acres in size and was an unintentional allowance during the code update in 2021. So what staff initially proposed was that we amend the standards to align with what was really previously in place prior to the code adoption, so really since 2001 up to that 2021 timeframe, which was to allow for unlimited signage for our casinos and for the downtown entertainment district. And this was more of a defined area of approximately 140 acres. So again, we were proposing to shrink that unlimited area down quite a bit. But we have moved forward with eliminating that downtown area completely. So what this effectively does is allows for this unlimited and much larger signage only for the casinos. Okay, so all of that feedback we received, including what we just talked about with that unlimited signage, really brought us to here, which is the second draft of the proposed amendments. So again, I've already said this, but we removed that gaming overlay unlimited signage area and really shift that to the casinos. The urban district freestanding sign area allowance, there were some concerns expressed by some stakeholders on, basically we used to allow for doubling of that sign area for these specific districts if on these larger parcels in these bigger areas. So this really would carry forward something that exists to a point today in code. It's a little bit different the way it was determined, but they requested that we try and keep that because it actually is utilized. And then earlier I mentioned we had some engagement with the Washoe County School District where they requested to have the ability to have some digital signage for schools. So the proposed amendments include this allowance, but also include some specific requirements to really mitigate the impact to some neighboring properties. Oftentimes schools are placed in residential districts. So we try to mitigate some of those issues through the regulations in the table. So this includes things like limiting the time that the sign can be on, the nits, or really that measurement of light that the sign can be, and the digital portion of the sign size. We also added some additional specifics on regulations to make sure that administration on our end is more clear and consistent. And then we also amended our illumination standards for residential and those unincorporated transition zone areas. Again, these really function like all the residential districts to allow for indirect illumination only. We previously had an allowance for some level of internal illumination, but it was based on a dark or opaque background, and it was very confusing to administer. So we said, let's just, those are residential districts, let's do indirect illumination. All right, we also added some verbiage regarding the number of freestanding signs allowed for commercial centers, which really memorializes a practice that already occurs and attempts to minimize visual clutter. So basically we have some of these neighborhood or commercial shopping centers, and they may have 5 parcels, which may typically allow for 5 freestanding signs. However, they're functioning as one commercial center. So in those cases, we say that's really one site. You can have one freestanding sign. So this really memorializes that practice there. We also, again, we talked about, there are some concerns expressed by the other partner agencies. So this includes our Regional Transportation Commission regarding public projects that they take on that might require a business owner to relocate one of their signs. And this ensures that those business owners can still keep their signage, even if it does have to be relocated. So a lot of these signs were created before our regulations existed in the form that they do now. So this allows them to maintain what they have. All right, so overall, again, this is just kind of summing up everything we just talked about today. Overall, the proposed amendments include all of the information from our stakeholder input to develop both the first draft of the proposed changes and then the feedback from that draft to create this second draft here. So we've touched on all of these, but again, removed that allowance for all parcels within the gaming overlay to have that virtually unlimited signage and left this allowance only to our casinos. We updated the triggers for entitlement review to be consistent. All of those go through a major site plan review, which is a public hearing and go through our planning commission. We added a statement on content neutrality. We modified or added some definitions where necessary. We added sign requirements for districts that were inadvertently left out of that sign regulation table. We cleaned up that table again, be a little bit more clear on what we're doing there, what we're expecting, be clear and consistent, and then incorporating those 14 footnotes directly into the table where we could, again, try to make it a little bit more user-friendly. The second draft also includes that providing allowance for schools to have digital signage, and then any general clarifying language that was more necessary for implementation. As we were going through this process, we recognized, oh, that doesn't make sense, or we need to clean that up as well. So I really want to touch quickly on what is not changing. These items were items of much contention in the past, and I just want to note that we are not changing them in any of these drafts. So again, we are not touching off-premise regulations. Those are generally our billboard regulations. There's no changes to the regulations of digital and animated signs or their brightness, and then no changes to gas station signage. Okay, and back to that process piece. So again, council initiated a text amendment. We went through and got some stakeholder feedback on what we needed to change. We developed that first round of proposed amendments, took that back out to the stakeholders to receive more feedback, took that information also to our planning commission, our downtown businesses, our city council for feedback, and then developed this second draft of proposed amendments that we have here tonight. So right now we're in that public engagement period. We're going to take all the feedback we can. We'll incorporate necessary changes. And then we intend to take that through the adoption process. So we anticipate going to our planning commission in March and then to our city council in the April and May timeframe for an anticipated ordinance adoption of May 2025. So really quickly, I also just want to touch base with this group. We did have a meeting this morning, our first stakeholder meeting. This is our second. And I just want to kind of relay what the feedback was that I heard at that meeting. So most of it was related to concerns regarding the digital signage allowance for schools. These comments really touched on a desire for more regulations that are a bit more strict in terms of the hours of operation, have some more time between messaging changes, public safety concerns with drivers who might be looking at that messaging, sign brightness and general compatibility with the residential characteristics that these signs would often be located in, possible health impacts from the bright signage, particularly when it's adjacent to residential uses, and the potential for creeping of digital sign allowance into other districts for other uses. So with that, I'm going to open this meeting up for feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and you can do that through raising your little virtual hand. You can also at any time feel free to email me, whether it's before or after this meeting, or anytime that you might think of something that comes through your mind that you want to relay with regards to the signage. I'm available through multiple means. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up now. Looks like Lori, I'm going to unmute you on my end. And Lori, you should be able to unmute on your end.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks again for that great explanation, and also for the work that the staff and the city's done to try to listen to the stakeholders in the past meetings and make the changes that you've made so far. I'm here representing Scenic Nevada, and we really appreciate the fact that the unlimited signage for downtown was taken out. Since this morning when I was on the call, I thought of a few other things that I wanted to ask you about. The first one is, what is a definition of a school? It all has to do with digital signs for school because that's our main concern right now. It's a big change to the sign code from our point of view and from possibly the neighbors' points of view. So what is the definition of a school? Do preschools count? Do daycares count as a school?
Sure. Sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Okay. Adult education, and where these places are, like, especially like my children went to a preschool in a neighborhood, And if this is just the concern I was thinking about, well, what if a preschool moves in and has a digital sign and then they don't continue that use on in that, it's usually a converted home where they have those kinds of daycare and preschools. And I went to, was at two of them with my kids. And so I know they exist, and I don't know if the same ones do, but the point is, there's not going to be any kind of public hearing, no major site plan review. So you can't condition the sign to say if the use changes, you have to take the sign down or something like that. So that's that question. And the next one is advertising. The public schools today advertise on their chain link fences. They have plastic, I don't know how to describe them, plastic banners is how the best way to describe them. And the sign usually says, like, for instance, Mount Rose School appreciates the support of XYZ business, and it gives their logo and their phone number and their address. And these signs are maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet by 6 feet, and they are attached to chain link fences, pointing towards the street. Does that mean I don't have any more time left?
No, you're fine. It was someone else was jumping onto the meeting, so it
Oh,
chimes when
okay.
it does that. You've got plenty of time.
Okay, so my question is this: how are we going to regulate the schools? Because they're advertising now to earn money for their, and we did ask about that, and we were told it was a First Amendment right because of the way they say Mount Rose School is in support of so and so. That's a First Amendment issue. If you can support anybody you want and put it on a sign and put it out there, it's not advertising like a billboard. So these digital signs that are going to be flipping every 8 seconds, if the school would like to, maybe they'll sell. I mean, I've been told that they won't do that, but they already are doing it. So would they sell advertising on these signs and start flipping them? And how do we regulate that? And then the next thing is there a way? So that's my third point is there a way to survey the neighbors, the residents, to get this information more out to the public, because they really don't know what's coming down the pike. I don't know how many people you had this morning, or you have now, or you'll have on Thursday for your final stakeholder meeting. But it's really important to let people know what's about to happen in their neighborhood. And I was hoping there was a way the city could do a survey, I've heard that there were surveys about what color should the lights be on the arches? Can you not run one for how do you feel about a digital sign in front of your school? And I wanted to just make this one point, and it's not a criticism, but I just wanted to point out that Scenic Nevada has been involved in this process since spring of 2023. As you pointed out, it's been a long process and a lot of things have happened, and we were there throughout the entire one. The school district kind of came in on the end of this and asked for it from the city council. And so, this is sort of a brand new suggestion here. This has not been coming along all the way since 2023. This just happened like a few months ago. So I feel like we shouldn't rush into this. We should find out what people want, or what people think about it. And that's all I wanted to say. And if I could get those kind of questions answered, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. I think I have enough notes to answer your question, so hopefully I'm able to do so. So with regard to the definition, we have basically a list of essentially 156 uses, right? So schools are a specific use. Childcare centers are a different type of use. Adult education is also a different type of use. So we do have schools defined. Our schools are lumped together, both public and private schools. Charter schools are included in the public schools as well. And it's defined by the state law. So NRS defines both primary and secondary education. And that's how we also define that use. So it would be specific to those uses. And childcare centers and adult education are different uses than the use that we are suggesting is allowed this digital signage. Really, we're aimed at primary and secondary schools, whether they're public or private. So I think that gets at your first question. In regards to the advertising, again, we also cannot look at the content of that sign. I don't believe it's at all Washoe County's school district's intent to be advertising for these businesses, but I hear your concern there, and certainly we can have a conversation with the school district about what that might look like and if there's any assurity in there. And then in regards to getting this out to the bigger population, if you will, and seeing what they think about that. So we sent this blast list that we have for all of our sign code changes is almost 800 stakeholders long. And this includes things like obviously all the council members and planning commissioners, but also our ward NABs, neighborhood advisory boards, to try and get that information out to those respects as well. So we really tried to do a lot to get the word out. It's a matter of people also engaging, and that's kind of what these meetings are intended to do. But in terms of getting more feedback, I mean, this is going to go before our planning commission. It's going to go before 2 council meetings. So there's also those opportunities for public engagement. But it sounds like maybe you want more from what I'm hearing, but we do quite a bit on that front as well in terms of trying to get the word out and trying to get some engagement in these pieces. I think that answers most of your questions, Lori, but obviously you have my email as well and can certainly reach out if you think about something else. But I think that answers your questions. All right. Oh, Lori, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to, it does answer my questions, and I just wanted to thank you for that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Does anyone else wish to speak? If so, okay. We'll go ahead and start with Lee Willis. I have unmuted you on my end. You should be able to unmute on yours.
Hi, Lauren. I did submit a reason for why I was interested in this, and it's mostly has to do with brightness. I heard you loudly and clearly say that this is not about brightness, but I just wanted to make sure everybody remembers that due to our topography, we have a strong inclination to treasure our view shed. And a lot of us are up on these ridges looking downward. So we aren't in a flat city where we can't see a school that's 2 or 3 miles from us. Many of us are perched up here where I can literally see the GSR signs from 5 miles away. I've measured that. And I realize this is really ironic when we have all this casino lighting also, but that's not constantly at the brightness that the GSR sign is at. So I'm not just specifically talking about the GSR sign. I'm suggesting that the more and more these incredibly bright digital signs pop up, including at schools, more and more of us will be seeing these abominations, and it's just not inducive to the quality of life that we're used to here in the Truckee Meadows.
Thanks, Lee. I appreciate the feedback in there, and I'll be sure to include that as well.
Sorry, I meant conducive, not inducive.
Right. Thank you. All right, and then James, I have unmuted you on my end. You should be able to do so on yours as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm James Carpentier here on behalf of the Utah Sign Association and the International Sign Association, and really appreciate the opportunity to participate in the stakeholder meeting. And I also wanted to acknowledge Lauren and staff for all the work they've done, just simply because updating a sign code is truly one of the more complex things a planner can deal with. There's so many different issues to deal with and try to balance out. It's a real challenge. But the first thing I just would like to say is that The proposed changes we're very supportive of, primarily because it'll simplify and clarify the regulations, as Lauren referred to, which we fully support, as this will make administration of the code easier for staff and certainly for applicants. They'll have an easier understanding of what they can and can't do. And I just want to talk a little bit about the school regulations. We're very supportive of those regulations. And just to recap a little bit of what that will do and what it might actually look like, because I think there's a lot of concern over what it might actually appear to be versus what it will be. The EMCs would turn off at 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. They would not exceed 150 nits at nighttime, which is less than 1/2 of our recommended illumination standards for electronic message centers. So I would venture to say that the signs at any school would be no brighter than any static sign in the city. And based on my experience of measuring streetlights, it would be a fraction of the brightness of streetlights, which are much greater than 150 nits. And the areas of these signs would only be 32 square feet, which is pretty small, with an 8-second hold time, so there would be no flashing, and there would be static images only. And with an 8-second hold time, we think, and with the brightness standards that are proposed, which are very strict, that it will in fact fit into locations where schools typically are located, which is, as we've talked about, as I've heard, and we all know, it's often closer to or adjacent to a residential district. And these standards have really been tailored way stricter than any other district in the city. And I think because of that reason, I think it'll work really well, and it won't, it certainly will not have an impact in relation to brightness, simply because it won't be brighter than almost, most signs in the entire city, for sure. When compared to other electronic message centers, it'll be much, much less bright, and in most cases would be less bright. Like, say you had a static sign with this electronic message center, that message center would be no brighter than the static sign, and that's just based on experience, because 150 nits is certainly not too bright, because I know that the standard that we recommend is about 323 nits, and that works pretty well in brighter locations. And most of these locations would be not very bright. So at 150 nits, the sign would just function okay, and it would not appear to be out of place with the existing sign if a portion of it was static. And with that, that's all I have to say. And I really appreciate the opportunity to provide some thoughts and information, and happy to take any questions if anyone has any. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I definitely appreciate your input and your expertise there as well. With that added information, I appreciate it. All right, does anyone else wish to speak? Okay, seeing no additional hands there. Again, if anyone thinks of anything or you're looking to engage on this further, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. My email here, knoxl@reno.gov. You can go on the city's website as well to view all of the material, the proposed changes, and see my contact info there as well. With that, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you.